listening to With AI FM.
Hi everyone, welcome to Creatives with AI. I'm Lena Robinson, your host, and have we got a show for you. We are welcoming back David Brown, who is our OG, the original host of Creatives with AI, but now Startups with AI host. He's coming on as a guest because we are having a good chat to Doug Ayres, who was introduced to us by a previous guest, Michael Crawley, and also we have somebody in common. Shout out to Paddy Affleck out there, who we both know. And I was introduced, as I said, by Michael, and you'll come onto the show to talk about AI because you are now a co-founder and co-MD of two businesses in the AI world. One is an AI consultancy, and one is working with non-profits and charities providing a AI-powered chatbot solution. So we're going to talk more about that later on, but we've decided to try something new. We want to kickstart the conversation by the three of us bringing something that we've seen in the news, something in the zeitgeist that's happening at the moment. So I'm going to hand it over to Dave to kickstart that, because I think you wanted to give that bit a go first. Over to you, Dave.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for that, Lena. Yeah, so I've seen something really interesting. So there's a guy named Roy Lee who was at Columbia University, and he developed a tool essentially that helps people cheat. And it's called Cluely. And what it does is you run it on your computer, and it pops up an overlay that goes over your screen. So let's say you're on a job interview or you're in a meeting or whatever where you want to have some support from AI. It actually will run and listen to your conversation, and it will give you real-time feedback. So if someone asks you a question, for example, it will actually start to give you answers and suggested responses to that. And it's hidden even if you share your screen. So in a lot of interview situations today, people, the companies interviewing make you share your screen because they want to know that you're not using AI. So this intentionally circumvents that. And he got suspended from the university for building these cheating tools. The first one that he built was specifically for engineers and software engineers when they do coding tests and they do real-time coding tests. That was the first one that he built that got him suspended from uni. But he's now gone on, and I'm looking at they've already got 70,000 users signed up. By the way, this is not an ad for Cluely. It's just even though I'm going to get onto my opinion about it in just a second, and I'm interested in your guys' opinion of this as well. But I mean, it has 11.7 million views on the launch video, and 70,000 users already signed up, like I said, and he's raised 5.3 million in seed funding to just get the MVP built. Now, this has been a massive discussion on LinkedIn. And if you search for Cluely, I'm sure it'll come up. Or if you go to my profile, you can probably see where I've commented on it. But there are two very distinct camps on this, and I'm curious to know which one you guys are in. I will set my style out and say, my comment to the LinkedIn article was, I would almost prefer it if I was interviewing someone and they did this, because I think the future is understanding and learning how to use AI and how to incorporate it in what you do in your life and as an employee. And I think anybody that, I run a video studio, I have a media company, I do all the, podcasts and all that sort of stuff. But as I grow my team and I bring new people on, I want them to understand how to use AI, and I want them to understand what comes with that, where it's right, where it's good, where it's bad, all that sort of stuff. I want my new employees to be kind of knee deep in AI already. So for me, I would almost prefer it if someone were doing that. Now, I know there's a whole nother camp that they say, no, that's cheating and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's great. But if you say that, you're trying to hire someone for a job 20 years ago. You're not trying to hire a job hire someone for a job in the next 5 years. So anyway, that's my interesting one that I have for today. So what do you guys think?
A view on that? I mean, I certainly do. Let me wait in, but I'll let Doug go first. What do you think, Doug?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a lot of views on that because that is a huge can of worms. I think, yes, everyone should be aware and adopting AI technologies to some degree to support what they do. But in terms of the Cluely example, when you've got people who are basically faking it until they make it, in especially like something like, let's take the example of coding, right? If they're doing a test and somehow, I'm not quite sure how it will work, where they're doing some sort of real-time test with code and they're getting support there, they're going to get found out pretty quickly by the employer at the end of the day when you get into a coding environment with testing and pair programming and all that good stuff. So I think the implication there is pretty bad for companies who are hiring in that way, because the cost of that to the company of hiring a dud is going to be huge. But maybe that, like, coding isn't a great example. Maybe in terms of someone who's going for a more process-driven job, they should definitely be bringing AI to the table to their new employees to go, you could be doing it this way. I think that's a really interesting area to think about. But yeah, it's that topic in its own right could be a 5-hour podcast, quite frankly. So I'll leave it there.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I'm standing in both camps, because on one hand, I think, which is not like me, usually I'm like black or white, right? But there's a reason why I'm in both camps. So I'm all for, and always have been, be the business that's future-proofing itself and driving itself forward. So from that perspective, Dave, I agree. You want to see those people with those skills. Like, there's a massive tick in the box, right? But here's the other thing, and I've talked to other guests about this before as well, is that I think the challenge is, how do we ensure that interpersonal skills and a whole lot of other things are still being maintained? And because we've already seen it with social media, kids are not having conversations the way that we did, or they're not out doing a lot of the things that we used to do, because they're sitting on their phones, or they're interacting in different ways than we originally did. And I think that's an issue. So that's why I've got a problem with it. All for skills being upgraded and looking for those skills when we're hiring, and them showing those skills. But what if there was part of it was done like that, and part of it was like, there's still a bit where I need you to shut your thing, and that's where I guess we're in the middle of the interview, and hopefully it's a face-to-face interview. See, because I don't trust CVs, for example, as the thing that's going to make me hire people. I'm famous for hiring people going, I don't give a fuck about your CV. Talk to me, answer me. And the question that I've always asked, which has always been able to tell me usually whether I want to hire them or not, is like, who inspires you and why? And there's a something in there. And I don't want a chatbot answer, no offense to chatbots, but I don't want an answer from AI. I want that person to give me their heart and soul, and give me the who they are inside. So that's kind of why I'm sitting on both fences, which is a bit weird because I'm not used to doing that.
But there's always, there's that, famous expression, which is you hire for fit and you train for skill. And I 100% really believe that. And I've hired hundreds of people through my career, and the most successful ones were the people that I hired because I felt like they were the right person, even if they didn't have technically the skills or the background that I thought that they wanted. I'll do very quickly one example of that, and then I want to hand over, Lena, for you to bring your story. But I interviewed this guy, and as he was walking through the office, when the interview was finished, there was some grapes sitting on the table, on the desk of one of the people. And as he walked by, he literally took a grape off that person's desk, didn't ask, just literally grabbed a grape and ate the grape as he was walking by. And the guy that was sitting there was like, what the, what are you doing? And I was like, that's balls. And I loved that. I loved the fact that he did that, and he just had the confidence to do that. And I was like, I'm hiring that guy. And he worked for that company. He's passed on. He's actually died of cancer eventually, but he worked at that company for nearly 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Through, multiple sales. He grew his career. He ended up running an international team like in New York and everything. And it was amazing.
Isn't that funny? I would have done the complete opposite. I would have gone, fucking rude. No, you're out.
And I wasn't really going to hire him. I wasn't that impressed until he did that. And then I was like, I love this guy that he had the balls to do that. So anyway, there you go. Lena, what's your story that you're bringing?
So I'm doing a little bit of a weird thing. Sorry, I'm opening my iPad so I can look at the article because my brain is not working particularly well. 52 years old, brain fog shit going on today. So mine is about something I read from New Scientist, which is an amazing publication. Is Keir Starmer being advised by AI? The UK government won't tell us. So apparently, that's the headline. They have something called, they've developed it inside of the governmental departments, and it's called Redbox. And the New Scientist has asked for data and everything. Only 2 departments said that they were going to give any data, and I think some of them have said they delete it automatically. The prompts don't get saved, and I think half of it's probably bullshit. But anyway, what it made me think about, because there was 2 areas I think that they were most concerned about when it sort of delved down into it, which was, and this is not new to us in this conversation, accuracy of content and bias, and how is it being AI used? How is AI being used by the different departments, but also, and they did answer that 3,000 people within the group that looks after Keir Starmer specifically are using it. What they wouldn't get drilled down to is how specific it is. But it made me think a question, which I want to pose to the 2 of you, is if it's advising Keir Starmer, what the fuck would it do if it advised Putin or Trump, or is it already advising Trump and that's why he's acting like such a dick? I don't know. Throwing that out to you.
I'll jump in first. I think we'd probably be better off if it was advising Putin and Trump, frankly. Because again, the way it works is it works on averages, right? And it's a predictive model. So it's constantly pushing everything, I think, towards the middle. And what it ends up doing is it's presenting the thing that's the most likely, or the kind of the average. And I'm sure Doug will probably correct me on this because he's way more technical than me. But basically, that's what it's doing, and it's predicting what's the most likely thing based on all the data. So if you put all the data of the entire world in there, it's averaging all of that out. So it's taking away all the extremes. So frankly, it's probably better. It would probably give better advice, and it would keep the edges, the extreme edges on either side out. So first of all, there's that. Second of all, I would argue that a lot of the tools that the government are probably using are not what strictly engineers would call AI. It's more machine learning than AI. And those machine learning tools they've been using for 30 years or 40 years or 50 years. Ever since the invention of the computer, they've been doing, sort of machine learning and statistical analysis. I know certainly since the 90s, they've been using, a lot of organizations have been using machine learning, which today everybody's calling AI because it's the sexy thing that everybody wants to talk about. It's not actually AI. It's a different set of mathematics that work in the background. But the salespeople like to call it AI, and the engineers will call it machine learning. And that's been in place for years and years and years. And not too long ago, I worked in public sector, so I do have to be a little bit careful about what I say here. But I saw a presentation by the lady who ran the data analysis team at Number 10. Now, this was pre-Keir Starmer, but that team has no bearing on who's the prime minister. It's the team that's there that supports whoever is the prime minister. But she was saying that some of the newer tools and the newer machine learning that they had available meant that they could do analysis that used to take a team of 4 or 5 people 3 or 4 days, sometimes a week. They could literally set it up. They could run it over lunchtime. They could literally, one person could set it up, set it off, go off and get some lunch and come back, and they could have the answer by the time they came back to the office. And it just massively reduced the amount of time. And what they did is, in those government tools, instead of it being a black box, like a lot of the, if you just use ChatGPT, you have no idea what it's doing in the back. But the tools that the government use specifically export the instructions and the logic that they used to get the data that the answer that they gave you. So they can cross-check it if they need to make sure specifically that the maths and everything was correct in the background. So this is something that's not talked about publicly. And I don't think that's any, that's not any government. I didn't have to sign it's not classified information or anything, but I do think it's an interesting little wrinkle that most people don't realize. So I suspect that there are a lot more controls in place than people realize. So it's probably fine.
Doug, want to weigh in on this? I can see you scribbling notes.
I've been scribbling away. I call BS on the advising line. I don't think that's happening. What I like to think, although you have to take these things with a pinch of salt with any government, is that they've got, as David alluded to, the controls and the security around what it's doing and when. So that, like, at the foundations of it, when we're talking about machine learning, natural language processing, et cetera, you've got a data set that it is its corpus, its knowledge base, and garbage in, garbage out. So let's hope the data set that it's querying is competent and right and truthful and all those good things, whatever the topic is. And that therefore becomes a knowledge retrieval job, and how well it can do that on a very large data set. I think, things have moved on a lot in the AI space. I think a really interesting area we might talk about a bit more later is around prompt engineering. And this calls into question what is that prompt? Is Sakir sitting there?
Sounds like they're deleting half of them.
What's he asking? That's just on a really noddy basic level, but these systems get better and better if they have a really sophisticated prompt or an engineer approach to prompting the system and it's much more than, can you tell me what the weather's like in Mallorca today? It's like these system prompts are long, and recently ChatGPT, for example, I think Anthropic and Gemini and the rest of them are all sort of containing this, is the control around the reasoning, and sort of you can prompt it to say, look, don't make shit up, just give me facts back, give me real data, and the model will adhere to that. So they're trying to absolve themselves of hallucination. But the knowledge retrieval and the prompt and the data set is really, really important. And that's my view on it. I call BS on advising, but I think that it could be, the government could be using it for, knowledge retrieval at serious speed.
Hello, everyone. David here. Just a quick note to say that we had some technical issues with the software we use to record remotely. So we ended up stopping the conversation and switching over to Zoom. So I apologize for the difference in the quality if it sounds any different, and it definitely looks different if you're watching it. So just wanted to jump in and let you know what happened, but we picked up the conversation where we left off and we carry on.
Okay, well, that was an interesting area of conversation, wasn't it? So, Doug, what's your article?
Really quite geeky, to be honest. I'm a bit embarrassed. There's something being talked about a lot in tech news, but also quite a lot on YouTube if the algorithm's checking what you look at around AI, and it's called the Model Context Protocol, which is MCP for short. There's been quite a lot of fanfare about it. It's basically how you can, it's been called a USB for models and tools and functions, and how you can intertwine LLMs into actions, on mostly in the examples I've seen are around on your own device, your own laptop. The importance of this is that you can really get agentic AI working. It's not like go to chatgpt.com, ask it a question, get a response, or go to something like Replit and create a website and push it to a database and yada, yada, yada. If anyone hasn't heard of Replit, go and check out.
We'll stick it in the show notes for you.
No coding
You really
tools
are
and
in
all
the
that
weeds.
sort of stuff. So an example, a really naughty example of this would be you set up an MCP server on your laptop. Caveat here, that's slightly technical, but I think in the next 3-6 months, there'll be wrappers around that protocol so that anyone can do it, just like downloading WhatsApp. So if you've got an MCP server running on your laptop, you can give it access to your local credentials and also your online credentials. So an example from me might be, every so often I go into London, so I don't have a season ticket. I buy a ticket on the day, and it's a very low level first world problem faff of going into the app, choosing the time, knowing that I want to go off peak and choose a time, again on the way back, and yada yada. It's booking a train ticket, and then I have to go and do the Apple Pay or whatever. With this protocol, you could basically give it access to your card details, and it's all secure because it's the same process as paying by, I say all secure, but anyone looking at this go, hang on a moment. But anyway, for the sake of this conversation, it's secure, and it's encrypted at rest and yada yada. So I could go to the agent within MCP and go, I'm going to London tomorrow. It already knows, because I've used it before, that it's Paddington. Even if I say London, because that's where I go into, it knows what my local station is, because it's got memory and context about the previous things I've done. So you can literally, it might even go, well, last time we booked a ticket for you at about 10:30. Do you want to go at the same time? Yeah, whatever. You can just ask it, and it'll perform it. It won't just give you ideas for when and where. It'll go, do you want me to transact? Just give it permission to do it. It's the same with lots of transactional things. I'm not just talking about money transaction, but when you need to send something to somewhere or do something with data. I think that understanding of how you can bring an LLM to run, interconnections between their purpose. So the purpose of that model is to go and look at this, go and do this, fulfill this, and come back. Another part of that whole movement of MCP is kind of being supported by what the likes of ChatGPT are doing with their latest models like O3 and O4 Mini, where they're really thinking about how you can use dynamic feedback loops and reasoning, and not just go, there's the output, that's right. It'll question itself, and there's a lot
what it needed, isn't it? It needed that. Yeah. On one hand, I quite like the fact, because adulting's fucking hard. And I hate admin, and admin's annoying, and I'm a creative, and when I get too much of that stuff, it blocks my brain, right?
Yeah.
So on one hand, I'm like, oh yay, let's let it. And also when I'm using things like ChatGPT, I have to then go and think, like, I need to grab this document and I need to grab that one. I mean, if it had access to everything that's on my Dropbox around my methodologies and tools and everything, that would make it a lot easier. It would be quite. So from that perspective, I think it's a really cool thing. And I'm probably 99% like, yeah, let it just do its thing. The one thing, and this is a generational thing and an age thing, letting it have access to my money, nah, fuck off. There's something like, but I know it's silly because it's not logical. It's an emotional thing. It's like, I don't even let friends have access to my bank cards. Like, lots of people just hand their bank cards. I don't do that. I don't. Yeah. Anyway, it's a bit of control freak.
But you're handing it, like,
my thought.
just on that point though, you're handing, like, just because they're trusted, like Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Stripe.
I know. It's stupid, isn't it?
You've given them access to your card details or your bank details for direct debit. It's the same thing. But you're not giving
what that is?
ChatGPT.
That's brand power. I trust the brands.
But they're the ones giving you the card, sort of. Some of it. So it is a little bit different, but
yeah, I suppose.
I agree, Doug. I totally understand what you're saying, and Lena, understand what you're saying as well. It's interesting, this whole idea of agents. I was having a discussion with somebody else on another show the other day. So you have no idea how many podcasts I go on. But one of the things they were talking about, the Perplexity voice model, which is essentially the same thing that you're talking about. And, they were saying that it's basically reached the point that it's better than Siri at doing a lot of stuff. And we were sort of thinking, and I threw the idea out there. So I'm throwing it out here in case anybody hears it, because you heard it here first or second, which is, I wouldn't be surprised if Apple went out and just bought them. Ooh. Because Perplexity, they've already tied it in. So it has sort of more access on, particularly on an iPhone, than most apps are allowed to have. So they've obviously got some sort of a special relationship with Apple already. Mm-hmm. And if it's already more functional than Siri and can do a lot of stuff that Siri can't do, you almost have to think that would just be the play, right? Like Apple has some ridiculous, like $1 trillion of cash in the bank. So they can literally just walk up and, they can just buy Perplexity for whatever. Like they don't even care at this point, because they can't do their own AI anyway. Their Apple Intelligence thing was ridiculous to begin with, and it's terrible. Yeah.
And so, what shares you're going to be buying next then?
Yeah, well, I should have bought them 20 years ago.
Oh,
bugger! I wouldn't.
Is that Apple or Perplexity before they existed?
Well, probably.
Yeah. So anyway, and on a personal level, I'm all for it. There's a book, and the reason I was looking away is I was looking up the name of the book. So Dan Brown, the guy who wrote Da Vinci Code and all that sort of stuff, his last book that was published was called Origins. And if you haven't read it, have you read it, Doug?
I haven't finished it. I started it. I've got it somewhere.
I'm going to add that to my long list of books I have not read yet.
I can't talk about it then. Damn. Okay. Read it. I'll just say, just read it. I think that's and we'll come back and have an offline discussion about it.
That means we're already setting up round 2 of this discussion by the sounds of it, Doug.
Yeah. Or drinks at the pub or something.
So, just on your point about Perplexity, I've watched a few interviews with the founder, and I'm not going to try and butcher the pronunciation of his name, but anything can happen, but I feel like he's not the kind of guy who wants to sell out to Apple. He was talking literally this week about the conversation around OpenAI wanting to buy Chrome, if they were going to dismantle part of Google. And his viewpoint was, no, obviously we discussed it, but not as the discussion around, should we do it? It's more like, oh, that's happening. That's a conversation. They're looking into building, their own browser. They're thinking about the future. There's another podcast in its own right is around the future of search. And that kind of links into MCP territory. It's like all those browser-based things you do in the multimodality, and just it's watching locally what you do. I go back to the security point, which will be brand recognition. If Microsoft or Google come out with something like that, you'll be like, they're fine. But who knows? Maybe they will. But my hunch is that he wouldn't sell out.
I think everybody has a price.
Yeah.
You look at Barbara Broccoli and the family that controlled the Bond IP, and the studio bought all the studio IP, but Barbara still and her son, I think, had control of the who did what, and she basically said, we're never going to sell. And then Amazon gave her $1 billion, and she said, okay, fine. So, again,
it's happening all the time, isn't it? It's like Wiz getting bought for $3 billion. When you have an
unlimited amount of cash on hand, I think that. So anyway, that could be interesting.
It could. Well,
while we're talking about agents, that's a good segue.
It is a very good segue. So that is the first true trial of the news area, which was actually really fun and really interesting. So I'm definitely looking forward to more of those. So, Doug, before we jump into talking about specifically what your views are of what's going on in your industry at the moment, there's one question I always really like to ask. We are creatives with AI after all, is what your view is about how you define creativity. How do you define it from your...
I did write some notes on this as a precursor because obviously we saw the question beforehand, and then I just ended up writing reams and reams of drivel.
Top line.
Creativity is like symbolically, it's like a new thought, a new approach to something that might exist, or something totally new in terms of thinking or how you present an idea and a concept. I feel like it's difficult to articulate in one sentence what it is.
Okay.
But I think that if that's like as it pertains to AI, and I'm probably jumping the gun here, is that
Right.
the creativity that people are talking about from AI is beholden to human creativity. Like at its core, everything that it's leveraging, what it's making stuff up from, reasoning from, is human knowledge and human creativity, whether that's written knowledge, written creativity, visual, sense, whatever. So creativity is not, as it relates to AI or human creativity, is not dead.
No.
Like, I think it's the one shining light around everything. Around everything becoming so, on a level plane, as to the points about bias and about what these models do, what these things are doing, how it's making everything, probably it'll get more and more normalized and boring. So creativity is going to become more and more important. So is human empathy. So the things that what makes us human versus being able to spout out knowledge and science. It's those things that creativity, to my mind, I've been talking about this for about like 8 years since I really got into this, was around, that's just a really important facet to what makes us human. Anyway, let's not get too deep.
No, that's well, then we can go deep at another time, maybe on round 2. What I think is really interesting about that, so you've taken a journey, and having done my stalking on LinkedIn thing and researching you and talking to you as well a month or so ago when we first had a chat about this, was, you've been an architect, you've been a designer, so you are truly, in my mind, a creative, but you've ended up sort of owning several businesses, one of which I think you sold prior, that are leading the way in the AI evolution. So you've got EBM, which is your sort of end-to-end consulting and engineering support business, and then you've got, and I'm trying to read my own writing here, Chat2Impact, which is, I want to dig more into this, I'm sure Dave does as well, is AI-powered chatbot solution for nonprofits and charities. So based on that, what I'd like to ask you is, like, how is AI through that lens impacting what you are doing as businesses, impact across how it's impacting the humans as well? Impact, that's really what I'm trying to get
at. Really good question. I mean, probably a bit of a weird one for me, because that's what our business gives as consultancies to other businesses. So,
well, how is it impacting those businesses then? Is probably the better question.
At the end of the day, they come to us because they're either looking to understand the implications of doing something with it, obviously to the benefit, not to the detriment of the company, but that can be taken many ways. But to our customers, we've been building out different kinds of solutions. A lot of them have. The low-hanging fruit back in the day were chatbots. And it's quite funny but obvious to me that the biggest shout. The biggest implementation, the most obvious implementation that's going on everywhere is essentially ostensibly a chat bot for the masses. So everyone was going, oh, chatbots crap. Yeah, they were crap because they would, they were decision trees and, more basic forms of natural language processing and very, turn-based. So lots of those things we're doing. But in terms of our other projects, clients are starting to understand how they can use, I don't want to say generative AI, but LLMs for knowledge retrieval, which is kind of the most important one to my mind, around how business can take their own IP, their own knowledge, and commoditize it internally or make it more openly available. So conversations where I've had a few conversations this year around SOPs sort of function, so standard operating procedures in quite complicated businesses, whether you're in marine biology or marine manufacturing or northern gas networks or something like that. There's these really smart folk there who know how these things work, and they're getting to retirement age, and now is the best opportunity to bottle their IP into these processes. So you have all these, you get them to write loads of documentation and ways of working and everything else, and then use an LLM to query that so that when you're onboarding people and they're out and about, they can do that. They can get that knowledge back really, really quickly and summarize and reasoning and all those things we've been talking about. How it's affecting us, even in the way we work, just in our day-to-day process as a business, other than the fact we basically stand on the shoulders of giants. So we're a Google Cloud partner. We'll take their technology, we'll plumb stuff together. I don't want to talk about wrappers, but we basically plumb these APIs and these technologies together for a given task. But even internally, like we use it as much as any company probably to write, blog posts as a first draft based on a topic, and then we go through it. We don't just shove it out there, but we use it as a base for what we're doing. We'll use it for all sorts of kind of knowledge retrieval. We'll do it for ideation as well, just as a Kickstarter. We're thinking of a name for this thing we're doing. It's related to this, and this. Can you think of any words that are 7 letters that sound this or that, and it'll produce a list?
It's great.
Low hanging stuff. Like we even use it for image generation for some of our decks. I've been using Photoshop for about 20 years, and I still need to play around with that. But off the cuff image generation is getting unbelievable, and it's going to get better. And I don't know, there'll be a point where you just can't make it any better. But there's a long way to go. But it's getting pretty darn good.
Yeah, I've found that probably using the wrong tool. Actually, I haven't used Midjourney or anything. I used ChatGPT to do some image things. Oh my god, it was horrendous. And I'm used to briefing creatives, so I do brief it like I'm briefing a creative. But oh my god, the things that came out. I was trying to do. It's going to make it sound really funny. I was trying to just basically do a visual representation of a process that onboarding process for something for my artists actually, and it came out with something that had been designed for Russian propaganda in like the 1930s. It was hilarious, and I just kept trying to, and I just kept getting it wrong. So I was using the wrong tool, but I do think it's interesting that you're using it for ideation and things like that. I think that's where a lot of people are starting to use it. And what you're doing though, you're talking about the sort of the chat bots and things for what you're doing with the NGOs. I'm really interested in digging into what you're doing with that, because I think that's quite an interesting, charities and NGOs is quite interesting.
The use case low hanging fruit is for process automation, a lot of these non-profits we work with are short-staffed, so they want to be there for their supporters and their beneficiaries, and they're looking at ways to be there and be, present in a strange way, but so answer questions when the answer to whatever that person's looking for isn't quickly receivable from their website, researchable. Also automating processes that they usually spend a bit of time doing. Like if you're most of these medium-sized charities have some sort of CRM, and when someone's changing their address or wants to do an event or do this and do that, change their donation, it's a lot of these processes, you can configure these systems like a chat interface to push and pull data from an API and do those things for them with authentication. So we're doing some of that stuff. The one that I talk about a lot, because it's I think a really cool use of the technology in a really sort of harsh area, is for NSPCC's Childline.
Right, okay. Yep.
So we started working with them in 2019, still working with them now, and it was quite well timed ahead of COVID. So if you don't know what Childline is, it's basically a support line that mostly youths, from say 8 to 18 or whatever, will call in if they're in tough circumstances, whatever that might be, whether it's domestic abuse or peer-to-peer abuse or just having, dark thoughts about the world as it is. The problem the NSP, the problem it was solving with what we built was it was a chat interface sort of in front of the counsellor on Childline, is that there wasn't always a counsellor or enough counsellors there to be immediately taking a call from, many hundreds or thousands of children at any given time, often in the middle of the night. They do have counsellors on, but not enough to deal with the volume. So the idea here was, how can we feel like their needs are even minutely met whilst they're waiting to get on a call? So we created a dialogue that helped with that. That was also, obviously, there's one of, benefit of that was just trying to hold them on the line and reassure them. And we worked with the NSPCC to make sure that the information we were giving out, and it was all, safe, hygienic for the use case. And the other side of it was helping counsellors prepare for the call before they got onto it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because they're looking at the chat that the individuals already had. So there's a little bit of context of really obvious stuff when you think about it, but they had the balls, or whatever the term is,
to do it.
The impetus to go and do this, right? And so that's one really interesting use case. But other areas around knowledge retrieval is like we're working with another charity called Turn to Us and looking at how we can implement a better grant search for some 3,000 grants that they.
It's tough. I've had to do it manually when I've worked with charities before. It is horrendous. Takes days and days and days, and even then you don't know what you're doing.
This is even this isn't for when people hear about grants, they go, well, as businesses, when you hear about grants, you go, oh, that'll be that, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 for something. This is for really small grants, like some white goods, like a shopping coupon, like things like that. So it's a one-to-one like grant. Where can I get things that are, for that individual? And therefore the search becomes quite nuanced. And using you can see how an LLM approach and this kind of approach to that, all of that knowledge of that information, and using this, it would have been taken a long time to do it through just like machine learning, etc. But now you can do a bit of RAG, retrieval augmented generation, use a question, take out the intents in that and the entities, and bring an answer back. Sorry, getting a bit geeky there.
No, I like the
really
geeky. That's
powerful.
fine.
And we wouldn't have approached it like 2 years ago like this.
Yeah.
and it would have been a longer project, quite frankly.
I'd imagine it's quite a game changer for the charities and the not-for-profits to have somebody like you guiding them, because having worked in several, it's a really tough place to work. The time constraints, and to your point, the resource constraints are just so massive, so that if you can help with any of that, that's extraordinary.
Hopefully, I mean, we're still small. Like, we're a boutique. There's like 10 of us, so we can't do everything. That's why we built this Chat2Impact solution. Like, try and make it super, super cheap, but start to try and get charities on the AI train, to do things in a slightly different way. We've got a long way to go, and what's center and front of mind for me is keeping it accessible but also safe. I think charities I know charities, from what I've heard anecdotally, they're often the last to adopt new technologies, not because they don't want to, but because they're charities and they've got so many other balls they're juggling. So we're trying to lead the charge a little bit in that area on a very obvious use case for them. But there's so many other use cases outside of chatbots, like grant search, like actually on a one-to-one doing this MCP conversation we had earlier. That could be really useful for individuals at charities to go off and use these different systems. But to your point, Lena, about image generation, you made a funny comment about the AI chose the wrong tool.
Oh,
and I was thinking, actually, no.
I chose the wrong tool.
So what a really, I'd say obvious, but hopefully a useful sort of way of thinking about it is actually, before you ask something like ChatGPT to do that thing for you, go and ask them how they'd approach it or what are the best tools. Because it's got a
better way of doing it.
And then it'll go, well, actually, you could do it this way and but you might want to go and use this over here to do that. Because there's a lot of talk around wrappers around LLMs, about wrappers or solutions that do one part of Gen AI really, really well. So you'll go off and find a slide creation tool that can take diagrams, and there's a few out there. Another one that's just come out from China is called GenSpark, and they do lots of stuff, but their shining agent is this slide creation model. So go and check that out. But that's what's happening. Like, it is getting splintered because people are creating wrappers to do certain things really, really well, and that will then become down to user interface design and UX. Because you probably could spend hours going back and forth with ChatGPT to try and get, and you thought, I might as well have just gone into PowerPoint or Google Slides and done it myself.
Yeah.
Well, the challenge is, at the minute, I think, from someone who uses it, is that you now end up with, if you want to use all those tools, you could end up with 20 subscriptions.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the big challenge, is it then becomes not economical to have to do that. And I've said, from the very beginning, and from some of my experience working with machine learning and stuff like that in the past, I think what we're going to end up with is a federated model, which means there will be one AI that's your LLM, that's your conversational AI, that will sit on top.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody will interact with. But underneath it, there will be specially trained AIs or machine learning tools that will do different tasks in different specific areas. So you'll have a physics engine, you'll have a marketing engine, you'll have, do you know what I mean? You'll have an image engine, you'll have a video engine, you'll have a chess engine, you'll have
absolutely.
And that top layer will abstract all of that, and you'll just ask it a question, and then it will go away to that specialist AI that's in its network, and it will go and bring back the data and just act as a conduit. So I think that's where we'll end up eventually. And then what we'll see is also that abstraction layer on top that's where you'll get the different versions. So there'll be, the culture and everything in Western Europe is very different than, say, North America, which is very different than, places in the global South. You look at Brazil and South America is very different than Australia and New Zealand. So, I think each kind of region is going to end up having its own top layer, but
Yeah.
I think you'll end up with these core services that will be underneath it. I did want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. One of the things with the very original chatbots, I think was, and you mentioned decision trees, and people, as soon as the new LLMs came out, they went, "Oh, this is great. They can talk about stuff." And then what they found is it was giving inaccurate information.
Mm.
What I want to ask you, Doug, is from your perspective, when companies now are doing chatbots, and you're saying, or developing an AI product, and they're training it on their own data, are they turning down the randomness quotient or randomness factor? Because that's a part of why AI hallucinates as much as it does, I think, is because what the researchers found is that they have to force randomness into the answers, because otherwise it gives exactly the same answer all the time and it doesn't feel human. Because humans, if I ask you the same question 5 times, you will give me a slightly different answer every time. And so there is a number that they put in to force it to be more or less random. And I'm assuming that for things like, company information or internal tools, and I was looking for it while you guys were talking. I was trying to find the article, but it's one of the big consultancies like Ernst & Young or PwC or something has trained a tool on 100 years worth of their documentation and work that they've given to all of their customers. And it's a totally enclosed system. So they've trained it only on their own data. And they now give that to their consultants to use to help them generate more information. But I would imagine that the randomness is turned down on that so that it gives a little bit of randomness, but it will give a more consistent answer. And is that, I guess my question is that how it works? Because you're building them. So do you do that, or is there another way that you try to ensure that you get consistent answers?
Really good question. So Gemini, for example, calls it creativity versus randomness. I think a lot of them starting to use creativity, and you can set the creativity down to like literally, not literally 0. I think it's like 0.01 or whatever. So there's that. I think that the big thing that was missing from what you were just saying was around the prompt, was actually what you're asking the model to do, and how you can also control it in that sense by saying, do not make shit up. Like you can to your point, it's a really good example actually, Dave, that you mentioned around Jack and Ori time, when you're telling a story down the pub, and you'll tell the story down the pub one day, or bar, whichever the audience is, and then 2 weeks later you'll tell the same story, and it'll be the same story, but you'll just say it slightly differently because it's not a
creative license.
Creative license.
Right.
And maybe that time it gets funnier with age as you make more stuff up. I mean, I know mine do.
It's probably because we just forget shit.
It's called embellish. But the interesting point around that, if you could say it's interesting, is what you were saying about how information is reproduced. Now, if you can make sure the factual information is always correct, like you're looking at an annual report and you're going, well, EBITDA was X.
Yeah.
That has to be said. It can't make that stuff up, and that's in the knowledge base. But it can fluff it around it. It goes, I found this. Oh, interesting you asked that. You can do that, and that's not hallucinating. That's kind of where they're meshing human interaction with factual stuff, and that's doable. And in terms of what we like with Chat2Impact, what we first launched with, which is the current iteration, but we're add in more LLM smarts into it, is one part of it is called the FAQ Genie, which is basically we get a URL from the charities website. They put it one in at a time at the moment. We're not doing the whole lot. One page at a time. It goes and scrapes the page. It indexes, and it basically creates questions and answers from that page to get them going. And then the charity can view the questions and answers, and they can annotate them. I'm not annotating them, sorry. Edit them. And what's sort of controlled is that we're using an LLM to look at the question the user asks and match it to a question in their version of Chat2Impact, but not the answer. The answer is always what they've defined it as, pre-canned, no hallucination. It's just going, the user's asking this is the closest we've got to their question to our question, and here's the answer, if you get what I mean. And that's therefore controlled, right? It's not making stuff up. And if it doesn't have an answer, it doesn't give an answer. What we're about to do is actually go, well, look, you've got the FAQ genie, but you've also got an approach where you can tell the user, we found this information on the website. So we scrape the whole of their website, store it. And if there's no answer in the genie, there's a fallback to the LLM to look at and do the RAG piece. And it'll tell them, here's the answer. We've done a prompt that says, don't make stuff up, and also reference where you got the answer from. And that, for charities and everyone, really, quite frankly, it feels like it's quite safe. It's not, but this is low level controlled AI versus the bigger conversations around generative AI, like in ChatGPT, and doing some things really well and other things really badly. Anyway, I've gone off on a tangent there. Sorry.
No.
Right, tangent's
I
fine.
led you down the path.
Thank you. The reality is, to a lot of big organisations, this is just sort of reasonably basic, but to a smaller company or to a small charity, that is so, I don't keep wanting to use the word game changing, but it will be game changing for them to be able to, like you said, I've worked for charities where, you don't have people that are on all the time, but the ability to be able to answer questions of, I've worked for a young people at risk charity in the past, and I know that, they didn't always have people on board being able to answer questions. If they can do that through that process, then that's quite a game changer for the young people as well, or whoever is the beneficiaries of any kind of charity or what have you.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of makes me then think about, we were going to talk about the future, so I thought that segues quite nicely into what does the future start to look like, I was going to sort of do a sort of 3-5 years and then all the way out, but let's just sort of mash it all together and look like, what does the future look like from your perspective? Because you're obviously having to look at it on behalf of your clients for both businesses. Look, from that lens, what do you think the future sort of looks like for future of work, the people that you're working with, but just sort of humans in general when it comes to AI through the lens that you understand? What's coming?
Armageddon. No.
A tsunami. I was going to say a tsunami, but yeah.
That's hilarious.
It does. I'm not intelligent enough to really figure out, find a happy place for myself in what's happening, because I can't quite configure it in my head, to be honest. And I'm not trying to be a fantasist or churning the wheel of doom, but I think everything's going to change in the next 5-10 years. I don't know how quick. I'm not talking about AGI yet. I do worry about bigger things that are happening in the world of quantum computing and about how that's going to disrupt everything from a security point of view.
David, I'd love to talk to you about that.
I'll try and bring this back. I will bring this in my own mind back down to where we are, and what's happening is, it's all very well, bringing it back to what we're doing now, it's all very well bringing these chat interfaces onto these websites, etc. But what is the future of how people interact with the web? How are they finding out what they need, and what are they doing? Talking about MCP, or about how they transact or do things and where they go, and that in just as humans, how we interact with knowledge and the internet. I can't even begin to articulate what that is. The other side of it for businesses is what is the role of so many people? What's their purpose? And what's the end game here? When businesses are all about, well, not all of them, but a lot of them are about profit above purpose, about shareholder value, and this technology is disruptive to the nth degree in that regard, because it's going to make a lot of roles redundant. Like it will, because you will be able to use. I think, David, when you were talking about the layers of AI systems and ChatGPT, there'll be one to rule them, and then these others, which is basically agentic AI or AI systems. I feel like those things getting built out, whether OpenAI owns all the underlying stuff as well, it's those things are going to get built, and they're going to do things really, really well, and it will need less people to do those things. And I'm talking about in the online world. What happens in manufacturing and engineering? Like, maybe because of this technology, it's going to help us create stuff that's going to need more people to go and be more building stuff and doing things, versus very much my environment is the online environment and comms and information augmentation versus actual physical world, what is getting done out there. I don't know. My answer is I don't know what the future brings.
Right.
I'm slightly nervous. I'm not going to lie about, and I've got 3 kids, and I don't know when they get into work and later down in their career, or even their kids, hopefully, like
I think they'll automatically, because I think the generation coming up, I think they'll flex, because that's the world they automatically know. Like we've got better, like our generation compared to our parents' generation, whatever, we've all got better at flexing. We no longer expect that we're going to have a job for 20, 30 years and then retire, and I think as the generations are going through, millennials flexed a bit more, Gen Zers are flexing a bit more, and whatever the next one, I can't remember what it's called, Alpha or whatever.
Gen Z,
they're calling it Gen AI now.
They're called what?
Gen AI.
Oh, okay, Gen AI. Well, they're right. I think they'll be fine, because they'll be born into a world of knowing that they need to pivot. I hate that word, but anyway, you know what I mean? That's my thought.
My question, though, is what are they going to do?
Fuck no. They're probably going to make coffee.
Well, it's interesting. Doug, how old are your kids, if you don't mind?
And not at all. About to turn 16, 14, and about to turn 12.
Okay.
In the next month or so.
So you've got someone doing maybe GCSEs or just starting to study for A levels coming along. My son's going to be 18 next month. He's doing his A levels now.
Right.
A lot of the kids, not all, but a significant number of the kids in his school basically have already sacked off the idea of going to uni.
Yeah.
Because they've recognized the fact that anything that they would study for at uni in 10 years isn't going to probably exist, and it's going to be extremely difficult to work in. So a lot of them, particularly the boys, now this is a whole different gender discussion that we could veer off and crash into if we wanted to, but maybe we'll do that another time or on my other podcast. But a lot of the boys are looking at trades, and they're going to go down the apprenticeship route. They're going to get back into doing, I keep telling my son, I keep saying, look, be an electrician. I'm like, seriously, you can get an apprenticeship. They're desperate for people. You could get a good job. You get paid and you get training. At the end of it, you've got your license to be an electrician, and you can go off. And once you're fully qualified, you're looking at between 50 and 80 grand a year straight away. And I'm like, and you put it down at the end of the day, right? Yeah, okay, you work hard during the day, but when you're finished with your shift, you go home and that's it. You don't have to worry about it till the next day. And then you go back and you do your thing. And, so I think that for the midterm, I think a lot of the jobs that people are going to have to go back into doing physical jobs. So it's going to be service jobs. It's going to be, doing trades. It's going to be those kinds of things, because what we're seeing is they're calling it quiet layoffs. And essentially what's happening in the marketplace is twofold. What we're seeing, one is companies aren't laying off people because that's bad PR. But what they're doing is they're saying, you have to come back to the office. The people don't want to come to the office, so they quit. And then those companies just don't hire anyone to replace them because they don't need to, because their employees using AI can do everything. And this is what we're seeing. So and I talked about this in March of 2023, not to thing. But this is what we're seeing. So they're just not filling in those junior roles anymore. And so we're going to see over the next kind of decade a very slow erosion of the lower levels working its way into the mid-level positions because they're just not going to be needed. And that's going to be the problem. And it's going to be 5 or 10 years down the road. When kids that are in primary school now are coming out of doing their A levels and they're going out, and there's not going to be anywhere for them to go other than for them to do things like jobs that require a physical human to do it. Robotics is 30, 40 years away, no matter what anyone says. I know people who build robots for a living, and they're way too expensive. They're way too sensitive. They break so easily, and they're just not economical to even maintain. So okay, robotic arms in a factory is one thing, but like a human kind of shaped thing that you think could go into your house and do your electrics, nah, we're miles
away.
Yeah,
I totally agree. I mean, I'm pleased there's another dad out there who's of that mindset. I mean, I haven't had this conversation down the pub very often, but I am of exactly the same thought, and I probably said it in like 2011 or something, just to get that in there. No, it's a joke.
Go on.
But I've been saying that to my we're not worthy. I've been saying that to my eldest because he's obviously the one who's getting into that space faster than the other two. Is that those like things that AI can't replicate are the things you need to go and look at.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's some areas of engineering that are quite sort of a little bit protected. I can't substantiate that at all. I've just got this weird idea that there are things, but I think the things where you need to be there in person, out and about, or doing stuff that isn't going to get automated anytime soon is where they should be going. And I've also said to my eldest, like, I'm not sure university is necessary either. I mean, I was at university 30 years ago, and I even remember at that time thinking I shouldn't have bothered going to uni.
Yeah,
I studied architecture, but I never became an architect. But
right.
I just remembered thinking, well, that was a waste of 3 years. I should have just gone into work. Honestly, I met some wonderful people, but it was a bit of a joke, really. But yeah, look, going back, bringing it back on track, I think you're absolutely spot on, I think, in terms of the future of work and what people are going to be doing. And the knowledge workers are a bit screwed.
Yeah, it's coming for the smart people, which it's never done before. And we don't know what to do with that.
I think I'd be screwed in like 5 years, 10 years time.
Yeah.
I
like a bit of physical labor though, so I don't mind. And interestingly, in my own career, I'm now looking at setting up and running a studio, which is a physical space for people to use. Because again, the knowledge work, the desk work, I'm already looking at it and going, more and more people are going online. They're doing more creative stuff. They all want to be influencers and they want to do this and that.
Yeah.
And having a physical space where people can go and they can do that, it's something that, AI can't do. And so I'm already heading that direction, myself.
And me too. I mean, I made a decision that I told Dave about a couple of weeks ago that although I will take on consultancy work, I am no longer going to be marketing the consultancy side of the business, because where I see myself, I've got multiple elements of content creation and what have you, and my biggest strength is me, my personality, my background, my stories, my everything else, and my ability to do this. Like, I've not been trained to be a podcaster. I do seem to have this is me not shooting my own, blowing my own trumpet too much, but I seem to have a natural capability of it, and I think I'm having to, at 52 years of age, I've got to start thinking about what does the future look like. I'm the kind of person that doesn't want to probably truly retire ever, because that's too bloody boring. So, like, what do you want to do? But how do I be that person that steps from where we are at the moment into what the future's going to be? And I'm quite excited. I'm quite lucky, though, that I'm a person that can do physical things. My dad taught me how to build things and create things and what have you, and that's a creativity as well. I'm a creative. I'm an artist. But I'm also a strategist and a thinker and what have you. And it's like, but I'm a communicator. So I'm not worried about my future because I think it'll be fine. But also, I'm one of those rare people that I'm really good at flex. I do not get frightened. I've done talks on this. I have intentionally over my life, well, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. But I throw grenades into my life when I think it's just like, oh, for fuck's sake, this is just ridiculous. And I'll be going like this, and then I'll go whoop and go completely in the sideways. Now, whether that's my bipolar or not, I don't know. But I'll throw in the grenade because I know something's not right and it needs to move in a different direction. I'm very lucky that I'm not afraid of that. I think people will find difficult, and I understand where it comes from. Fear makes people make bad decisions.
Yeah.
My first business that I launched over here, its underlying philosophy was bring on the brave, because my business partner and I had realized that the flip side of that was the reason why businesses do make bad decisions, or people make bad decisions in business, is out of fear. And I think one of the things I want to be focusing on to help people move into the future is how do we help them deal with the fear? Because I think that's going to be a big one.
Yeah, I mean, I personally could talk for hours on this topic.
Me too.
I also you don't want to sound like you're too sort of unaware of what else is out there in the world. Or we're talking about, I think we're all based in the UK, but we're talking about a very sort of developed world, Western kind of mindset and worry and fear and problem, whereas a lot of the world isn't developed, and a lot of those things are, they're industrializing in a different way, so they won't. That isn't a pain point for them because they're already doing. There's still so many of the population doing these things, David, that you're talking about that we're, I guess, in a weird way, going to maybe regress back to by being more physical in our presence and more, doing things the old way in a new way.
That's right.
I kind of like that. That's a really good place to end. Doing things, I like that line. Doing things the new way based on the old way, or vice versa. I think that's
whatever it is. Yeah.
The old way and the new way.
The old way and the new way. It's been a really interesting conversation today. I've loved having you on, Doug. It's been quite fascinating to hear your background and what's going on, but also really nice to co-host with Dave Brown. It's been lovely. I have one more question. I know we're heading towards the end of the show, but it's a question we always ask, and it's a very simple one. I haven't prepped you on this one, which is, if you were to recommend or request that we would have one particular guest on this show, and it can be anybody that's out there, whether you know them or not, who would you recommend as a guest that you'd like to see on Creatives with AI?
Can they be really famous?
They can be really famous. We've had famous people on already.
God, there's just so many interesting people out there in the world.
They could be an artist, they could be a musician, they could be an architect, they could be
anyone.
An agency person, could be a film person, an actor. I don't know.
Do you want me to give a name while Doug's thinking?
Sure.
I'll fill some time for you, Doug.
I
want to have Jordan Peterson on.
Oh, yeah.
I want to have Jordan Peterson on.
Oh, yeah.
Every time anybody asks me, I'm always like, I want JP on because I want to talk to him about.
We'll get him at one point.
It's really weird you said that, because I was thinking around those areas, and I was thinking and I think a lot of people also share this this opinion, but Stephen Fry is one of the most interesting people to listen to on any topic, even when he's really reading Harry Potter. I would probably, and I know that he's obviously chatted to Jordan Peterson quite a few times, and they have a pretty intellectual debate, and well, it's always bound to be, isn't it? But I'd love it if you got Stephen Fry on.
That would be amazing. Yeah,
he is already on my list. Don't worry.
He talks about AI quite a lot. I saw him at God, what was it called? There was a big AI conference a few years ago with the O2, and he came and did a presentation.
Is it CogX?
CogX, yeah. I saw him at CogX. That was it. And yeah, no, that's a great name. He'd be amazing.
Well, we will give it a go, and I'm sure at some point there's probably people I know or people that Dave knows somehow that we could find him. I know he's not particularly cheap because I've tried to cost him before.
So if anybody knows Jordan Peterson or Stephen Fry, please, make an introduction for us.
Exactly.
Well, look, I'll just get on the case.
Exactly.
I would just want to say a massive thank you to Doug to come on. It's been a very enlightening and interesting conversation, so thank you very much. Dave, thank you for being my partner in crime. It's been amazing. And thank you to the listeners. You guys are always out there supporting us and giving feedback on what you find interesting, so thank you very much. So stay curious, everyone. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.